I'm standing in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning, and I can't feel my hands. The document on the mahogany desk is 16 pages long. My name is highlighted in yellow. So is the word competency evaluation. So is the date of my involuntary psychiatric hold. The lawyer, a thin man with gray temples and tired eyes, is explaining something about my parents' petition, about how they've documented what they call concerning behavior, about how a judge has already signed off on preliminary paperwork. I read the highlighted section again. The petitioner demonstrates signs of delusional thinking, financial irresponsibility, and inability to manage personal affairs. Immediate psychiatric intervention is recommended. My voice comes out steady, controlled. When was this filed? Last week, he says. Thursday. I was in Cabo last Thursday. A trip I planned 6 months ago. A trip I paid for myself, with money from a job my parents didn't even know I had. And when do they? They can move for immediate commitment within 14 days if you continue to resist treatment. He removes his glasses. Have you been exhibiting paranoid tendencies, financial recklessness, any episodes that might have concerned them? The answer doesn't matter. He's already decided I'm either crazy or lying. That's when I understand. This isn't a scare tactic. This isn't a threat they're bluffing about. They're actually doing it. My parents, who raised me, who I've never fully understood, are trying to lock me away. And I finally know why. I stand up from the leather chair. Thank you for your time. He looks surprised. You're not going to. I'll handle it, I say. I walk out of that office with my hands steady, and my mind suddenly, crystallinely clear. For 3 months, I had been confused, hurt, questioning myself. But in this moment, in this hallway with corporate art on the walls and the faint smell of expensive coffee, something shifted inside my chest. Confusion ended. Planning began. Part 2, the girl before. 6 minutes. My name is Sarah, and I used to be the kind of person who believed in things like family and loyalty. I grew up in Westchester County, in a gray colonial house with black shutters and a circular driveway. My father, Michael, owned a commercial real estate firm. My mother, Christine, was a gallery curator who actually made very good money, though she preferred to let everyone think Dad was the primary earner. My younger brother, Daniel, was studying law at Columbia and already the golden child. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, the kind of comfortable that builds expectations. By the time I turned 27, I had a bachelor's degree in communications, a master's in nonprofit management, and a job directing a crisis counseling center in Manhattan. I lived in a small apartment in Astoria with my girlfriend, Maya, and I was happy. Actually, let me be more specific. I was content in a way that now seems impossibly naive. My apartment was the size of a matchbox, but it had an oversized window that faced west. I'd sit on the fire escape in summer and watch the light change over the buildings. Maya would bring wine and a book, and we'd sit in comfortable silence. The apartment smelled like the lavender soap I bought from the farmer's market. I had plants, real ones, not those fake arrangements rich people buy. My succulent collection lived on the window ledge. I actually loved my job. At the center, we helped people in crisis, abuse survivors, people struggling with addiction, teens in trauma. We didn't save anyone. That's not how it works. But sometimes a person would call at 3 a.m, desperate and alone, and after an hour on the phone, they'd decide not to hurt themselves. That matters. My parents didn't understand it. To them, crisis counseling was what you did if you couldn't get into law school or medicine or finance. It was a placeholder job, a temporary identity until I found something respectable. You have a master's degree, my mother said once over brunch at their country club. You could do anything. Why are you wasting it on people who are just going to hurt themselves anyway? I remember staring at my Eggs Benedict. I remember thinking how perfectly separated the hollandaise was from the toast. How there was a right way and a wrong way to arrange food on a plate, and my mother had always known exactly which was which. Because they might not, I said. She smiled like I'd made a charming joke. My relationship with my parents had always been the same texture, cordial, structured, like we were following a script that had been written long before I was born. Sunday brunches on the third week of each month, birthday dinners at restaurants they chose, holiday visits that lasted exactly 5 days, long enough to be dutiful, short enough to be tolerable. They called every Sunday, not to chat, to check in, to make sure I was following the invisible roadmap they'd drawn for my life. By the time I was 27, I had stopped fighting the script. I'd learned to give them the right answers. Yes, I was fine. Yes, the job was going well. No, I wasn't dating anyone serious. Yes, I was saving money. No, I didn't need their help. The last one was always a lie. But I had made a decision years ago. I would never ask them for anything. Because asking meant explaining. And explaining meant proving I was worthy of their investment. 6 months before the lawyer's office, before the psychiatric petition, everything changed. My father called on a Tuesday evening, not a Sunday. This was unusual enough that I answered immediately, thinking something had happened. "How much money do you have in savings?" he asked. "No, hello. No, how are you?" Why? "I need to know your current financial position." I set down my phone, picked it back up. "It's fine. I have a few months of emergency savings, which is what?" "And your girlfriend's family, how much money do they have?" The question was so random that I almost laughed. That's not really something I know. Why are you asking me this?" "We need to understand your overall financial health," he said. "We're concerned that you might be vulnerable to certain situations." "What situations?" "Can you come home this weekend? We'd like to discuss some things as a family." I didn't want to go. Something in his voice was off. Careful, like he was holding too much back. But I went anyway. Because despite everything, despite the coldness, despite the expectations, despite the feeling that I was always playing a role for them, they were still my parents. On Saturday morning, I sat in their living room. The furniture was exactly as it had always been, cream-colored, expensive, and somehow sterile. The photographs on the mantel were the same photographs that had been there for 15 years. My high school graduation, Daniel's law school acceptance, a family vacation in Bermuda from 2015. My mother brought coffee in the good china. My father sat across from me with Daniel next to him. Daniel looked uncomfortable. He was always uncomfortable when he had to be part of something dishonest. "We've been considering your future," my mother began. "I'm doing fine," I said. "You're living in a dangerous neighborhood," my father continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "You're working for an organization with minimal growth potential. You're in a lifestyle choice that doesn't align with family values." That's how they referred to my relationship with Maya, a lifestyle choice. "I'm happy," I said. "Happiness is a luxury," my mother said. "Stability is a necessity. We want to help you create stability." My father opened a leather folder. "We've arranged an opportunity for you. The Westchester Country Club is looking for an events director. The position pays $75,000. You'd be based here. We've already spoken to the hearing manager. The job is essentially yours if you want it." He slid a job description across the coffee table. I didn't touch it. I have a job I like. "That job has no future," my mother said gently. "And frankly, Sarah, the work is emotionally taxing. We worry about your mental health, being exposed to that kind of trauma all day." Something cold started moving through my chest. "My mental health is fine." "Is it?" my father asked. He had that expression he got when he was about to make a business point. Rational, logical, unchallengeable. "You've been single-focused on this job for 5 years. You live in a small apartment in a bad neighborhood. You're isolated from the family. That's not a healthy pattern." "I'm not isolated, and I'm not single-focused. I have a girlfriend, I have friends, A girlfriend," my mother said. "Yes, that's part of what we wanted to discuss." The room was very quiet. I could hear the wall clock ticking. I could hear traffic on the street outside. "We think it would be beneficial if you stepped back from that relationship." My father said, "Not permanently, just until you've stabilized your life, a cooling-off period." I stood up. "No." "Sarah," my mother said, "we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to protect you. Maya is a very nice person, but the relationship is clearly not conducive to your mental health. A year apart would give you perspective." "I'm not doing that." "Then we'll need to take alternative measures to ensure your well-being," my father said. This was said so mildly, with such parental concern, that I almost didn't understand what he meant. But Daniel flinched, and in that flinch I understood everything. "What alternative measures?" I asked. My father said nothing. My mother stirred her coffee. I left that house 20 minutes later. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I just walked to my car and drove back to the city. I called Maya from the road, and I didn't explain anything because I didn't have words for what had just happened. That weekend began the 3 months of confusion, of questioning myself, of lying awake at night wondering if I was actually as unstable as they'd implied, of wondering if my parents, people who had never raised a hand to me, never spoken harshly, never done anything overtly abusive, were truly trying to hurt me, or if I was being paranoid. I started tracking things. The comments my father made about money during phone calls. The way my mother began asking more detailed questions about my mental state. The small things, weird things. Like when my father asked the name of my therapist, and I told him, and then 2 weeks later a letter arrived at my job from a concerned colleague requesting information about my treatment. The letter was clearly not from a real colleague. It was a trap to see if I would respond in a certain way. I documented everything, dates, times, the exact wording of conversations, the way my mother's voice changed when she talked about what she called my lifestyle, the job offer my father had mentioned, how he made sure to tell me 3 separate times that the position was held for me if only I would agree. I told Maya what happened. She wanted me to cut them off completely. "They're trying to control you," she said. "They're being psychologically manipulative." I know she was right, but she didn't grow up with money like this. She didn't understand how people like my parents operated. They weren't cartoonish villains. They were subtle. They wrapped everything in concern. They framed control as love. And the worst part was this. I couldn't tell if they actually believed what they were saying about me, or if they knew they were lying. Then came the day I went to check my mail, and there was a notice from a lawyer. Part 3, The Betrayal. 6:12 minutes. I should have seen it coming. I had all the pieces, but seeing pieces and understanding the full picture are 2 different things. The competency evaluation petition was signed by 2 physicians. Dr. James Morrison, a psychiatrist my parents had known for years through charity gala events, and Dr. Patricia Leung, a general practitioner they'd been seeing since I was a teenager. Neither of them had examined me recently. Neither of them had called to schedule an appointment. They signed off on a document claiming I was a danger to myself, based entirely on information provided by my parents. The petition was accompanied by detailed notes. My parents had documented everything. They'd written down every moment I'd seemed mentally unstable in their presence. The time I raised my voice during a family dinner 3 years ago. The time I mentioned having a panic attack before a presentation at work. The time my mother called the crisis center and I didn't answer the phone immediately, and when I called her back, I explained I'd been in a counseling session. They had built a case, a false case, but a case nonetheless. The petition was filed under Article 80, one of the New York mental hygiene law. It allowed my parents, as family members, to petition for my involuntary psychiatric evaluation. If a judge agreed there was reasonable cause, I could be forced into a psychiatric hospital for up to 72 hours. During that time, they would have access to all my medical information. They could claim I was incompetent to make decisions about my own care, my own finances, my own life. If they succeeded, they could pursue a full conservatorship. That was the goal. I understood this with sudden, total clarity. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to take control of my life, legally, officially, with the power of the state behind them. I sat with this understanding for 3 days. I didn't tell Maya. I didn't call my therapist. I didn't reach out to anyone. I just sat in my apartment and let it settle into my bones. On the fourth day, I called my father. I want to understand, I said, why you did this. He was quiet for a moment. Did what? The petition, the psychiatric evaluation, the documentation. I want to know why. I could hear him breathing. I could hear him deciding whether to lie or tell the truth. Because we love you, he said finally, and we can't stand watching you destroy your life. My life isn't being destroyed. You're living with a woman in a terrible neighborhood, working a job that pays you nothing, isolating yourself from your family. You're not building anything. You're not moving toward anything. You're stagnant, and we're trying to help you see that before it's too late. By having me committed to a psychiatric hospital. By forcing you to confront your choices. You won't listen to reason. You won't accept our help, so we're going to help you whether you accept it or not. This was said with such absolute certainty, such parental authority, that I almost believed he actually thought he was being kind. I'm going to fight this, I said. You can try, he said, but you don't have the resources. You don't have a lawyer who specializes in this. We do. You don't have the documentation to disprove our claims. We do. And frankly, Sarah, any attempt to fight us will only reinforce the narrative that you're unstable. He was right about this. This was the cruelty of the trap. If I defended myself, I would be seen as defensive, paranoid, irrational. If I accepted the petition, I would be admitting I was unstable. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you need to understand that you can't win. Not the way you're thinking. If you want this to stop, if you want us to withdraw the petition, you have two choices. 1, you end your relationship with Maya and move home. We'll set you up with a job at the country club, you'll rebuild your life, and in 2 years, when you've proven yourself stable, you can move out again, this time on our terms. 2, you fight us in court, we expose your mental health history and your poor decision-making to a judge, and we get a conservatorship. Either way, your autonomy is gone. The only question is how much you're willing to give up. I hung up. I sat on my fire escape, and I watched the light change over the buildings, and I made a decision. I was going to destroy them. Not in anger, not in a dramatic way, not even in a way that would be immediately satisfying. I was going to destroy them the way they were trying to destroy me, methodically, legally, and with absolute precision. Over the next 48 hours, I did something my parents had never expected. I stopped fighting the narrative. I called the lawyer they'd hired for me and told him I was willing to cooperate with the evaluation. I called my father and told him I'd been thinking about what he said, and maybe they were right. I told him I'd consider the job offer. I asked him if I could come home for a few days. My mother cried, happy tears, relief tears, the tears of a woman who believed she'd won. Daniel texted me, "You made the right choice. It'll be good for you." Maya begged me not to go. It's not what it looks like, I told her, but I couldn't explain what it actually was. Part 4, the pressure. 12:20 minutes. The psychiatric evaluation took place on a Wednesday. Dr. Leung's office was on the Upper East Side, in one of those buildings where the elevator attendant greets you by name. She examined me for 40 minutes, asked me standard questions. How was my mood? Was I sleeping? Did I have suicidal ideation? Had I experienced any recent trauma? I answered carefully, not too honest, not too guarded. I hit the middle register. I was a woman in distress, reaching out for help, willing to be evaluated. She wrote things down, made notes I couldn't see. Afterwards, she told me, "Your parents care about you very much, but I think you know that. I'm going to recommend a short inpatient stay, just 48 hours. Time to stabilize. Time to talk through some of the stress you've been experiencing." "Okay," I said. She seemed surprised by my acceptance. "You're not upset?" "I'm tired," I said. I think I've been more stressed than I realized." This was the truth, actually. I had been stressed. The stress of being hunted by people who were supposed to love you. The stress of knowing that the system could be weaponized against you if you had money and persistence and a willingness to lie under the guise of concern. 3 days later, I was admitted to Westchester Psychiatric Center on a voluntary basis. I brought one bag, comfortable clothes, a book, my insurance card. The psychiatric ward was not what I expected. It was clean, almost pleasant. The walls were painted a calming shade of gray. There was a courtyard with actual sunlight. The other patients seemed mostly just tired. My roommate was a woman named Patricia who was recovering from a suicide attempt. She asked me why I was there, and I told her the truth. My family tried to have me committed because I wasn't following their plan for my life. She nodded like this made complete sense. My mother did that too. Different circumstances, but same idea. You don't fit the narrative, so you get labeled crazy. We spent the next 48 hours doing group therapy and attending classes on stress management. I participated fully. I raised my hand. I cried at appropriate moments. I shared about my difficult relationship with my parents while carefully avoiding saying anything that sounded paranoid or delusional. On the second day, my mother visited. She brought flowers and sat in the small visiting area with her hands folded on her lap. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Better," I said. I think I needed to be here to step back and see things clearly." "We've been so worried about you," she said. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're going to get through this, as a family." I squeezed back. "I was thinking," she continued, "when you're discharged, maybe it would be good for you to take some time away from the job. The stress at the crisis center, the emotional toll, it's clearly been harder than you admitted." "You're probably right," I said. "We'd like you to come home for a month, just a month. Rest, rebuild. Then you can revisit the country club position with a clearer mind." "Okay," I said. She smiled. Her face softened. She looked relieved. She looked like she thought she'd won. When I was discharged, I went home. My parents had prepared a room for me. The bedroom I'd had as a teenager, decorated as if I'd never left. It was a small horror. The acceptance letters from NYU and Columbia still framed on the wall. The photograph of me and my best friend from high school before we drifted apart. The bookshelf with books I'd read in high school, books my parents had approved of. I sat on the bed and felt the walls close in. For the next 3 weeks, I was a model daughter. I woke up early. I had breakfast with my mother. I went to therapy appointments with a therapist my parents chose. I attended family dinners where Daniel praised me for finally making the right choices. I didn't call Maya. My father had suggested that limiting contact would be part of the healing process. During the day, when my parents were at work, I explored the house. Specifically, I explored my father's office. I needed to understand the full scope of what they were planning. The psychiatric petition was the opening move, but there had to be more. People like my father didn't stop at threats. They had contingency plans. I found the filing cabinet behind his desk, not locked because he'd never imagined I would look. Inside were documents, property deeds, insurance policies, and a folder labeled Sarah Long-Term. Inside were drafts of a conservatorship petition, detailed notes about my pattern of poor decision-making, a list of my assets, which was disturbing because it meant they'd been tracking my financial accounts, and a communication with a lawyer discussing the timeline for moving forward with full legal guardianship. The email was dated 3 months before the psychiatric petition. They'd been planning this for longer than I realized. I photographed everything, every document, every email, every list. And that's when I found the piece that changed everything. It was a letter dated 5 years ago from an attorney. It discussed a financial matter involving my trust fund. My parents had set up a trust for me when I was born. I was supposed to have access to it at age 25. I'd be turning 28 in 3 months. The letter explained that my parents had been delaying my access to the funds. They claimed I wasn't financially stable enough to manage the money. The trust was worth approximately $450,000. They'd been stealing from me, not actively taking money, but preventing me from accessing what was legally mine, using my alleged instability as justification. And if they succeeded in getting a conservatorship, they would have complete control over the trust. They could use it however they wanted, declare it as their own asset, pay themselves for their care of me. This wasn't about my mental health. This wasn't about love. This was about money and power and the absolute certainty that they would never face consequences because I was their daughter and families don't prosecute each other. That night, I lay in the room that was supposed to be mine, and I felt something crystallize inside me. I stopped being hurt. I stopped being confused. I became something else entirely. I became strategic. Part 5, The Transformation. 26 minutes. On day 21 of being back in my parents' house, I asked to have a family meeting. We sat in the living room, the same cream-colored room where they'd first threatened me. My mother brought coffee in the good china. My father had his reading glasses on. Daniel had come home from Colombia for moral support, for them, not for me. I've been thinking about what you said, I began. About my life, my choices, my future, and I think you were right. I wasn't taking responsibility for myself. My mother's face did something complicated, relief mixed with triumph. I've been working with my therapist on accepting some of the concerns you've raised, and I realized something. The job at the crisis center, the relationship with Maya, the apartment in Astoria, I took those things on to feel independent. But they weren't actually making me happy. They were just keeping me stuck. We've always seen your potential, my mother said. You're so bright, Sarah, you could do anything. I want to take the job at the country club, I said, but I also want to move forward responsibly. I want to understand my finances better. I want to be an adult about my trust fund and my investments and my future. My father set down his coffee. I'm glad to hear that. So I wanted to talk to you about accessing my trust, I continued. I know I've struggled financially, and I know you were concerned about my stability, but I think understanding my assets would actually help me be more responsible. There was a pause, a very small pause, but I saw my father's jaw tighten. Your trust won't mature until you're 35, he said. That was the original agreement. This was a lie. I had read the documents. Actually, I said carefully, the trust matures at 28, which is in 3 months, and I'm entitled to receive quarterly distributions after that, with full access at 35. That's not, my father started. I had our family lawyer review the original trust document, I continued. Just to make sure I understood the details correctly, he confirmed the timeline. Another pause, longer this time. Well, my father said, we can discuss that with the estate attorney. There's no rush. I think there is, I said, because I want to be transparent with you. I'm planning to use part of the trust to pay for an attorney of my own, someone who specializes in family law and financial disputes. I want to fully understand my legal position before I make any major life decisions. My mother's face went very still. Sarah, that's not necessary, she said. We're your family. I know, I said, which is why I want to do this transparently. I don't want there to be any confusion about my assets or my intentions. I think it would be cleaner for everyone if I had independent legal counsel. I stood up. I'm going to start looking for my own apartment this week, probably back in the city, closer to work. And I'm going to need to arrange for my own mail to be forwarded there because I'll be updating my address with all my financial institutions. My father stood up too. He was angry. I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his voice became very controlled. If you're suggesting that we've done something improper with your trust fund, you're being paranoid and ungrateful. I'm not suggesting anything, I said. I'm being transparent. That's what you wanted, right? Transparency and responsibility. Daniel stood. I should get back to the city. I left the room and went upstairs to my temporary bedroom. I knew what would happen next. My father would consult with their lawyer. They would realize I was serious. They would start making threats disguised as concerned parent statements. I was right. That night, my father came to my room. What you said downstairs was inappropriate, he began. We have spent significant resources trying to help you. Money, time, emotional energy, and you repay us with accusations. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said. I'm asking for transparency about my own assets. Your mother is very hurt. I'm sure she is. If you pursue this course of action, if you hire a lawyer and start asking questions about your trust, it will force us to take additional protective measures. What does that mean? I asked. It means we'll move forward with the conservatorship. Permanently. We have medical documentation that supports our claims. We have a lawyer ready to file. And frankly, Sarah, if you're sitting here accusing us of financial impropriety, that only proves our point about your instability. This was the thing about family traps. The system itself was designed to trap you. If you fought back, you were unstable. If you complied, you lost yourself. I understand, I said. Then you'll stop this nonsense about independent counsel. No, I said. I'll still hire a lawyer, but I understand what you're saying. He left the room. I could hear him in the hallway making a phone call, talking to someone about filing papers, about timelines. 3 days later, I left the house. Part 6, the silent preparation. 26:32 minutes. I moved back to Astoria that Friday. Maya wasn't surprised to see me. She'd been waiting. She didn't ask where I'd been or why I'd left. She just held me while I cried. I cried for exactly 20 minutes. Then I stopped. I need your help, I said. Anything. I need you to do exactly what I say, and I can't explain why yet. Can you do that? She nodded. I need your phone number on a new phone plan that my parents don't know about. I need you to save all of our text messages. I need you to be willing to record phone calls if you're in a state where that's legal. New York required both party consent for recording, but I was already researching. Federal recording law only required one party to consent. If I called someone across state lines, I could record without their knowledge, as long as it was legal in my state. Sarah, what's going on? My parents are trying to take control of my life and my money through a false competency claim, but I can't fight them directly. I need to prove that they're the ones who are unstable, or at least, I need to prove that they're motivated by financial gain and not genuine concern. Over the next 3 weeks, I built a framework. I hired a lawyer named Rebecca Chen, who specialized in elder abuse and financial exploitation cases. She was taking me on contingency, meaning she didn't charge me up front, but would take a percentage of any settlement. This was important because it meant I didn't have to explain to my parents where I was getting money for legal fees. I told her everything: the trust fund, the psychiatric petition, the documentation I'd photographed, the conversation with my father where he'd basically threatened a conservatorship if I didn't comply. This is significant, she said, reading through my notes. Your parents have built a paper trail that could actually work against them. They've filed a psychiatric petition that's not supported by a genuine medical examination. They've attempted to coerce you into compliance by threatening further legal action. That's duress. What can we do? I asked. Right now, documentation. We keep building the record. Every threat, every phone call, every attempt to control you. We get it all in writing. And we need to prove that their motivation is financial, not medical. I started keeping a detailed log. I created a spreadsheet with dates, times, conversations, and direct quotes. I had Maya help me. She started documenting everything she witnessed. Calls from my parents, threats, coercive statements. Then I made my own calls. I called my mother and asked about the country club job. She was surprised. I've been thinking, I said, and I think you were right. I do need to move back home and get myself together, but I wanted to make sure the country club job was still available. Of course it is, my mother said. We've been holding it for you. And the salary is still $75,000. Yes, though honestly, Sarah, we've always believed you were worth more than that. I'm going to accept, I said, but I wanted to ask about financial planning. If I'm going to be more stable, I should probably be saving money, building an investment portfolio. The kind of thing a responsible adult does. I heard her smile in her voice. That's wonderful. Your father has always said the most important thing is getting you to think about your future. I've also been wanting to talk about my trust fund, I continued. I know we mentioned it was complicated, but I think it would actually help me be more responsible if I understood my assets. Is that something we could discuss with the family lawyer? There was a pause. Not long, but I heard it. Of course, we'll set up a meeting. Great. I'll need to bring my own attorney, just to make sure I fully understand the implications. I don't think that's necessary. I read something online about financial planning, I interrupted, and it recommended having independent counsel review any family financial arrangements. I think it's smart, don't you? She didn't answer directly. I'll have your father set up the meeting. I hung up the call and saved the recording to my encrypted laptop. Over the next week, I had 3 more conversations, each one carefully calibrated, each one designed to get my parents on record saying things that revealed their true intentions. In the second call, my father asked directly about the country club job. I need to know if you're going to commit, he said. I'm thinking about it. Can I ask you something, though? When I was home, I found some documents in your office about my trust fund. I was confused because the timeline didn't match what I thought. Can you explain? That's a conversation for your mother, he said. But the letter mentioned that you'd been delaying my access. Why would you do that? We were protecting your interests. You weren't ready to manage that kind of capital. But I'm 27. Most people get access to their trust at 25. Most people are more responsible than you've been. And now, if I take the country club job, does that mean I'll be responsible enough? A long silence. Your mother and I are considering the best way to structure your access to the trust. Some of it can go to you, but a portion should remain under our management until you've proven yourself. Proven myself how? By following the life plan we've outlined. New job, new living situation, stability. This was financial duress. This was coercion. I had it on tape. Okay, I said sweetly. I just wanted to make sure I understood. I want to do what's best for the family. The third call came from my mother, 3 days later. We've withdrawn the psychiatric petition, she said. You don't need to worry about that anymore. This was a significant move. They thought I'd been complying. They thought they'd won. That's a relief, I said. I was worried about having that on my record. Well, it's gone now. We're going to move forward as if it never happened. A fresh start for all of us. I really appreciate that, I said. I've been so grateful for how you've supported me through this difficult time. That's what families do, she said. We take care of each other. That night, I downloaded the recordings, all of them. I sent them to Rebecca with my notes. We have enough, she said, reading through everything. We have evidence of financial coercion, attempted use of the psychiatric system for financial control, and documentation that their motivation was never medical. We also have evidence of fraud in the original psychiatric petition. What do we do? I asked. We wait, and we keep documenting. In a week, you'll turn 28. Your trust will officially mature. Your parents will either have to release the funds, or they'll be in direct violation of the trust agreement. And if they don't release them, then we have grounds for a civil suit. We can also explore the possibility of reporting them to Adult Protective Services. But first, we need to see what they do. Part 7, The Twist. 35 minutes. My birthday was a Monday. I didn't expect my parents to do anything special. We weren't that kind of family, but my mother called that morning. Happy birthday, she said. We'd like to take you to dinner, your favorite restaurant, just the 3 of us. Daniel has to study, so it'll be intimate. It was a trap. I could feel it, but I also needed to be in the room where something would happen, so I agreed. We met at a restaurant in Westchester, one of those places where the food is excellent and the prices are designed to exclude anyone who needs to ask. My mother was already seated, dressed in a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My father arrived 5 minutes later. We ordered, made small talk, and then my father opened a folder. We wanted to give you something special for your birthday, he said. Recognition of your new commitments and your new maturity. He slid a document across the table. It was a modified trust agreement. The trust had matured, that part was correct, but they'd added a clause. A significant portion of the funds, $300,000, would be held in a protective arrangement under their management until I was 35. The remaining $150,000 would go to me. But there was a condition. If you marry without our approval, my father explained, if you engage in any relationship that we consider unstable, if you make major life decisions without consulting us, the entire trust reverts to your mother and me. I stared at the document. You can't do this, I said. Actually, we can, my father said. The original trust document gave us discretion in how funds are distributed. We've used that discretion. This is legal. Rebecca Chen would have told you that already if you'd been honest with her about your trust situation. My blood went cold. How do you think we're stupid, Sarah? My mother asked. We knew you'd hire a lawyer. We have a lawyer too, and our lawyer made some calls. Turns out Rebecca Chen is married to a woman. She has a reputation for taking on cases that involve coercion and abuse, so we knew exactly what you were planning. You're the one who's being deceptive, my father continued. You moved back home pretending to accept our help. You recorded conversations. You hired a lawyer without telling us. You've been building a case against your own parents. Because you're trying to steal from me. We're not stealing, my mother said. She sounded almost sad. We're protecting what you're not mature enough to handle. If you had just accepted our guidance, if you had just come home and lived the life we were offering, none of this would have been necessary. But you forced us into this position. This was classic. This was the ultimate manipulation. They were painting themselves as victims of my paranoia. I want my full trust fund, I said. Then come home, my father said. Take the job, end your relationship with Maya, live the life we've planned for you. And in 7 years, when you're stable and married to someone appropriate, the rest of the trust is yours. And if I don't? Then you get $150,000, and you have no access to the remaining funds, ever. Plus, we'll revisit the conservatorship question. He smiled. So you see, you have a choice to make, but either way, we win. I sat in that restaurant, and I understood something that changed everything. They had anticipated me. They had planned for my resistance. They had built the trap to seem like a choice, but every choice led back to their control. But then something else occurred to me, something that shifted the entire balance. They had revealed their strategy. They had admitted that they knew about my lawyer, that they were actively preventing me from accessing my own money, that they were using legal mechanisms to control me. And they had done it in a restaurant, a place with other people, a place with security cameras. My mother noticed my expression change. What? She asked. Nothing, I said. I stood up. Thank you for the birthday dinner. Sarah, sit down. We're not finished. Actually, I think we are. I walked out of that restaurant and I got in my car and I drove to my lawyer's office. It was 7 p.m. Rebecca was still there, working late. I told her everything, every word, every threat, every revelation. This is perfect, she said, listening carefully. But I need you to understand something. This is going to be painful. Exposing your parents, proving financial coercion, forcing them to release your trust. It's all possible. But it means breaking the family apart. It means court. It means your parents potentially facing criminal charges. It means being the person who destroyed your own family. They already destroyed it, I said. I'm just going to make sure they can't destroy anyone else. Then we need to move carefully. First, we send a letter demanding immediate release of your trust funds under the terms of the original agreement. Second, we file a report with Adult Protective Services about the coercive financial practices. Third, we build a case for civil fraud. And fourth, and this is important, we prepare for them to fight back. They have resources, they have a lawyer, and they will argue that everything they did was out of genuine concern for your well-being. Can we win? I think so, but you need to be sure this is what you want. I thought about the girl on the fire escape, watching the light change. I thought about the job I loved, working with people in crisis. I thought about Maya, who had waited for me while my parents tried to erase her from my life. "I'm sure," I said. "Then we start tomorrow. Tonight, I want you to go home and document everything you can remember about that dinner, word for word. And I want you to send me a list of everyone who knows about the modified trust agreement." Part 8, the confrontation. 38 minutes. The letter arrived at my parents' house on Wednesday morning. It was from Rebecca's firm, and it was formal and devastating. It outlined the legal violations in their modified trust agreement. It detailed the coercive financial practices. It listed the dates and content of their threatening conversations. It demanded immediate release of the full $450,000 within 30 days. I found out about the letter's impact because Daniel called me, panicked. "What did you do?" he asked. "What I had to do. Sarah, they're talking about lawyers and countersuits, and Mom is in her room. She won't come out. Dad's packing. It's chaos." "Good," I said. "This isn't good. This is family destruction." "No, Daniel, they destroyed the family. I'm just making them face consequences." He hung up. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I waited. I went to work. I spent time with Maya. I didn't hear from my parents, and they didn't make any moves toward compliance with the letter's demands. Then, on a Friday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my father's lawyer, demanding a settlement meeting. "Your father would like to discuss a resolution," the lawyer said, "one that doesn't involve litigation." "We can meet," I said, "but my attorney needs to be present." The meeting was set for the following Tuesday, in a conference room in downtown Manhattan. I spent the weekend preparing. Rebecca and I went through every possible scenario. What if they offered more money? What if they offered less? What if they tried to convince me to drop everything in exchange for a public apology? "Remember," Rebecca told me, "they'll try to make this about the money, but this isn't really about money. This is about power, and about setting a precedent. If you back down now, they'll know that threats and legal pressure work on you, and they'll use it on you forever." "What do you recommend?" I asked. "Push for the full amount, every penny of the original trust, and ask for a formal statement in writing admitting the coercive practices." "They'll never agree to that." "Probably not, which means we go to court." Tuesday morning, I sat across from my parents for the first time since my birthday dinner. My mother had aged. There were lines around her mouth I'd never noticed before. My father was rigid, controlled, but I could see the anger in his jaw. Their lawyer was a sharp woman named Patricia Wells, in her 60s, with the kind of presence that suggested she won most of the time. Rebecca sat next to me and smiled. "Thank you for meeting with us," Patricia began. "My clients are willing to discuss a resolution that might be more palatable to everyone involved." "We're listening," Rebecca said. "The modified trust agreement was a mistake," Patricia said, and I heard my mother suck in a breath. "My clients acknowledge that it doesn't align with the terms of the original agreement. They're willing to release $300,000 immediately. The remaining $150,000 can be distributed in quarterly installments over the next 2 years." This was still not the full amount. This was still control. "That's not acceptable," Rebecca said. "Full release of all funds within 30 days. Additionally, we want a written statement acknowledging the coercive nature of the financial arrangement." "That won't happen," my father said. "We will not admit to coercion. We were acting in our daughter's best interest." "You were acting to control her," Rebecca said. "And we have documentation of that. Recorded conversations where you explicitly state that financial access is contingent on her compliance with your preferred life path. That's financial duress under New York law." "Those recordings were made illegally," Patricia said. "In New York, we require two-party consent, but we also have written emails and text messages that say the same thing. Those aren't recordings. Those are admissions on paper." The room went quiet. "If we go to court," Rebecca continued, "we'll be asking not just for the trust funds, but for damages related to the psychiatric petition that was filed under false pretenses, the attempted conservatorship, and the ongoing financial abuse. That's going to be very expensive for your clients, and very public. My father's face was very red now. I'd never seen him truly angry in front of strangers. It was transformative. It made him look unstable. "You're destroying your family for money," he said to me. "No," I said, and my voice was steady. "I'm destroying my family because they tried to destroy me first, and I needed them to understand that I'm not someone who can be controlled. Not by threats, not by money, not by legal mechanisms." "You're throwing away everything we've given you," my mother said. "You gave me nothing," I said. "You gave me conditions. You gave me love that was contingent on compliance. You tried to have me committed because I wouldn't live the life you wanted. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm claiming what's actually mine." My father stood up. "We're done here." "Sit down," Patricia said quietly, and he did. Patricia looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at Rebecca. "What exactly is your client willing to accept?" Patricia asked. "Full trust fund, $350,000, released within 30 days, and a written statement that my clients acknowledge the coercive nature of the modified agreement and agree never to attempt further legal action regarding my client's personal or financial autonomy." "That's admitting fault." "Yes," Rebecca said, "which is the whole point." Patricia stood up. "I need to speak with my clients privately." Rebecca and I left the room. In the hallway, Rebecca put her hand on my shoulder. "You're doing great. This is exactly what should be happening. They're panicking because they know they can lose." 20 minutes later, Patricia came back out. "My clients will accept the settlement under one condition. The written statement remains confidential. Your client cannot discuss it publicly or with third parties." "No," Rebecca said immediately. "My client didn't agree to silence. My client agreed to this settlement so that the truth comes out." "Then we'll see you in court," Patricia said. But something had shifted. I could see it in the way Patricia held herself. She'd already started calculating the costs of litigation, the depositions, the discovery process. The more this went to court, the more would be exposed. Rebecca sent her a copy of the recorded conversations. Legal documentation that her clients had violated both their own daughter's trust and New York financial law. 3 days later, we got a call. Patricia wanted to schedule another settlement meeting. This time the offer was different. Full trust, released immediately, and a written acknowledgement. My father didn't attend the second meeting. Only my mother came, and she looked very small. Part 9, The Reckoning. 38:40 minutes. The settlement was finalized on a Thursday. $450,000 was transferred into an account in my name. The written acknowledgement was signed, though it would remain sealed unless I chose otherwise. I had won, completely, unambiguously. But standing in Rebecca's office, looking at the documentation of my victory, I didn't feel satisfied. I felt hollowed out. "What happens now?" I asked her. "You move forward," she said. "You've secured your future, you've set a legal precedent, and you've sent a message to your parents that manipulation has consequences. But we're still a family." "Are you?" she asked gently. "It sounds to me like you stopped being a family the moment they decided you were an asset to be managed rather than a person to be loved." I called Maya from the car. "It's done," I said. "Are you okay?" "I don't know yet." I drove back to the apartment. It was late, and the city was transitioning into night. The buildings were lit up. The streets were alive with people moving between destinations, and I felt, for the first time in months, like I was part of that movement, like I was going somewhere, like I was not frozen in someone else's expectations. Maya was waiting on the fire escape. She had wine and the kind of quiet presence that means someone actually understands you. "I got the money," I said. "That's amazing." "I also lost my parents." "Did you?" she asked, "or did they leave themselves?" I didn't answer because I was crying, and Maya was holding me, and we were watching the light change over the city the way we had before any of this began. The next morning, I called Daniel. "I need you to understand something," I said. I'm not your enemy, but I can't be silent about what they did. Not anymore. What does that mean? He asked. It means I'm telling my story. I'm posting the documentation publicly. I'm warning other people about what gaslighting and financial abuse and weaponizing psychiatric systems actually looks like. Because the only way families like ours keep controlling people is through silence, and I'm done being silent. I spent the next week preparing my narrative. I worked with a therapist who specialized in family trauma to process what had happened. I documented everything in writing. I created a comprehensive post with dates, amounts, direct quotes, and clear explanations of how the manipulation had worked. 2 weeks after the settlement, I posted it online. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People shared their own stories. People who had been in psychiatric hospitals for disagreeing with their parents. People who had been cut off financially for not following family expectations. People who had been gaslit into believing they were unstable when they were actually just trying to establish autonomy. The post went viral in certain communities: psychology forums, abuse survivor communities, financial independence networks. My parents' lawyer sent a cease and desist letter, but the settlement agreement didn't include a confidentiality clause. That was the one thing Patricia had failed to secure. I kept the post up. 3 weeks after posting, I got a call from my mother. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked. "People at the club are seeing this. People we know, we're being humiliated." "That's the point," I said quietly. "Humiliation is often the only consequence that stops people from doing this to others. If you'd faced consequences earlier, if someone had stopped you, you wouldn't have tried it on me." "We are your parents." "You were my parents," I corrected. Past tense. "I hope you'll get therapy and understand why you felt compelled to do this, and I hope you'll never try it again. But I can't have you in my life. That ship sailed when you decided I was a problem to be controlled rather than a person to be loved." I hung up. I didn't speak to them again after that, but the call validated everything. It confirmed that this hadn't been about my well-being. It had been about their need for control, and their humiliation at losing it. Epilogue: what comes after? 40+ minutes. 6 months after the settlement, I left my job at the crisis center. Not because my parents had damaged it, but because I'd outgrown it. I started my own consulting firm, working with nonprofit organizations on trauma-informed practices. The work was similar to what I'd been doing, but I had autonomy. I had agency. I had the knowledge that I was building something for myself, not for anyone else's validation. I kept the apartment in Astoria. Maya moved in officially. We got a plant together, something with deep green leaves and the promise of growth. The money from the settlement went into investments. I was careful with it, not reckless, but not fearful either. I was building a life that was actually mine. Sometimes I'd think about my parents, about how they must have felt when their strategy failed, when the narrative shifted from unstable daughter to controlling parents, when the family was fractured beyond repair. But mostly, I didn't think about them, because they'd already taken enough of my attention. The last thing I want to say, and this is important, is this. If you're reading this and you're in a situation where family members are using legal mechanisms to control you, where they're claiming to act out of love while systematically isolating you and controlling your autonomy, know this. It's not love. Love doesn't require obedience. Love doesn't demand that you erase yourself to fit someone else's expectations. Love doesn't use psychiatric systems as weapons or financial access as a bargaining chip. You're not crazy for resisting. You're not unstable for wanting autonomy. You're not ungrateful for protecting yourself. And you're not alone. The most powerful thing about my story isn't that I won against my parents. It's that I survived them. That I recognized the manipulation, I documented the abuse, and I didn't let their narrative become my reality. You can do the same. It takes courage. It takes clarity. It takes the willingness to be alone for a while. But on the other side of that courage, there's a fire escape and a view of the city changing colors. There's someone next to you who chose to be there. There's work that matters. There's a life that actually belongs to you. And that's more than enough.